You are now listening to the Low Hanging Fruits podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Chop, chop, chop.
Oh, hi everybody. I didn't see you there. This is the Low Hanging Fruits podcast. My name is Lauren.
I'm Constance.
My name is Elyssa.
I'm Bang Bang Duck. I had a whole thing here, but it was really obscure, so yeah.
Is our guest today for oh my god, how can we go about presenting this? Well, it started off as, of course, all the good quote unquote good things start on Twitter, the Twitter feud, I guess. And I guess how do we?
It's not a feud. If you have rats, you don't have a feud with the rats. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Well, the rats in question. The rats in question happened to be well, you were arguing with the author of the article we poured over, right? I think.
Okay, so Cosmonaut magazine, which if you haven't heard of it, good, is an interesting publication, and they published an article on why leftists should support Palestinian nationalism, or something along those lines. We'll get into it, but it's a little confused.
It's very confused. The name of the article is "Race, Class, and the Zionist State," published June 16, 2021. So yeah, and it's ostensibly it's a response to another article. Well,
another pair of articles, one by the International Communist Tendency, or the Internationalist Communist Tendency, who cares, and one by a group called Angry Workers of the World.
And funnily enough, when you click the very first link in the article that links to the International Communist Tendency, it links to the About page and not the actual article they wrote on this. This will come back later because apparently there was a bit of a trouble with another link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. So, how do we begin this? So, there's so many angles to go through here. So, basically, this comes down to, well, how do I put this? Like, it comes down to how you view class in such a I guess like in a settler colonial like situation, and then how that relates to like how whether you should support like quote unquote national liberation, whatever that means, because that can mean, well, that's one of the very slippery things. It can mean a lot of different things to multiple people, and it's very vague. It's very vague, and having read this article 2 times, it doesn't this is what I realized. It says that like the people they're arguing against are like hand waving things away, but they do this hand waving about the very thing they are arguing in favor of.
I think we should probably start by doing what this article doesn't, which is sort of explaining, you know, I imagine we probably all 4 of us have different opinions on this to some extent.
I think we should start by reading some segments of the article, and then you can explain the situation kind of as we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can just start like reading the start of the article, I guess, right? So
I'd love to. I've not read this. I deliberately avoided reading this for my own sanity.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, do you want to read it, Lauren? Do you want to read it, Lauren? Then.
Well,
No,
I
I do not. Please, don't. Nope. I do not.
Okay. Then I will read
No.
it. Okay, I will read it. So it
Read
starts.
never.
Okay, so the author gives a response to Angry Workers of the World on the issue of Palestine and Zionism. There is no path around the Intifada. The working class must go in and through it. Then begins. A recent series of articles on Palestine have come out from various groups in the left communist and autonomous milieus have caused quite a stir. The response from the International Communist Tendency was expected. However, I was more disappointed by the distortions put forward by UK-based Angry Workers of the World, whom I've followed for years for their work on workers' inquiry and workplace strategy. However, when it comes time to talk about Palestine, they drop the ball entirely. I find their analysis to miss the trust of the Intifada and is too preoccupied by the idea that it is the product of revanchist, blood and soil nationalism. Keep that in mind. Like most leftists, if we cannot control something, and if it doesn't fit our empirically pure understanding of class, we want to start putting our dogmas through the pamphlet brain machine like a square peg through a round hole. Whatever they envision in occupied Palestine is unlikely to ever unfold outside of the context of the Intifada. There is no path towards an internationalist working class struggle to avoid Intifada or treats it as something to be circumnavigated. So because I mean, I could keep reading, but already there's probably a few things me and Bang want to say, knowing what comes next.
Yeah. Do you want to? I guess I'll give my issues, which is that to start off, that I don't believe I don't have the ICT article in front of me because the link on the article here is broken.
I have the link, but yeah,
I've read it. I just don't have it in front of me, so I can't do this with it like I did with the Angry Workers of the World article, which is you just Control F Intifada, and neither one actually mentions any of the Intifadas. So for me, I have this immediate question with what is meant by Intifada here, because it's clearly something that the author feels is denounced in these articles implicitly. And if something is implicitly denounced, it's the task of the author to pull it out and to explain why this is something that's important for us to care about. This is all basic, fundamental essay writing, fundamental,
This does not happen at all.
This does not happen at all. And and the reason I want to pull out the reason to make this kind of deep criticism is because given how small the left is, when you have like an organization that is a magazine that is like pretensions to speaking for the left, not just speaking for like we're doing a podcast for us and our friends, you know what I mean? Maybe it has a bigger audience, but there's a difference between this kind of casual conversation and saying that you are speaking for the left, that you are actually trying to put forward some kind of position towards the revolution or whatever. And when you do that, you have to be held to a higher standard.
Mm-hmm.
Higher than undergraduate essay writing, at least. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think that's very disputable. I think you're dead on.
Because the thing is, Cosmonaut is also a sort of vehicle for what we call like quote unquote Marxist unity, which is like a Marxist centrist, Kautskyist, neo-Kautskyist like attempt at like not infiltrating, but try to stir up the DSA, I guess. So it's not even just a magazine. It's a magazine, but the ideology this magazine advocates for has people that are doing real political work. So,
and it's a very silly political position. I mean, it's objectively probably one of the stupidest political positions I think that has ever been put to paper.
Oh, and by the way, I just looked at the Leftcom, the ICT article. It does mention Intifada once, but as like a sub section header. That's the only one, and the Angry Workers of the World also does not mention Intifada. It is very focused on talking about the role of the middle class and Palestinian middle class.
We love that middle class, don't we, folks?
We love the middle class. The extremely well-defined middle class, I might add. The extremely
that very
clear
real thing.
Yeah. I don't like the way the ICT writes, honestly. It writes like they're trying to like imitate Bordiga, and it's bad. Bordiga's not a great writer. This is my hot take, but Bordiga's not what we in English in the 21st century would consider a good writer. I can't speak to his.
It might depend also on like the translations, I suppose. I don't know. But yeah. So, and yeah, to get back a bit into it, a lot of it, it just one of the fundamental problems that happens in this article is it's like the sort of like it's the sleight of hands that happen around the term like middle class or petty bourgeoisie, and also just trying it. It tries to make an argument that like the Israeli like Zionist state is almost like unique in many ways, but then uses broad examples taken from elsewhere and tries to apply it to Israel, and sort of in a way kind of like sort of demonstrate that it's not as unique as what you may think, but then acts as if that's not what's happening, and you have to take their word on it. So yeah.
Well, not to get too sooty, but I hate this the situation in Israel is unique. This is a platitude. This means nothing. Every situation in the world occupies a particular moment in space and time, right?
You might just say it is historically specific.
But this is a case of everything. This is like if you spent paragraphs and paragraphs belaboring the point that the ground is down. You know, it's tautological. It's intrinsic to the nature of an event in the world or of a situation in the world that it's specific. I don't like. Yeah. There's nothing more to say. It's a completely pointless.
I mean, I can just read because like I think it says
It
like
reminds me a bit of anytime anybody proposes changing anything in America, conservatives will say, well, you know, I mean, America is unique. We've got this history or this quality, this population, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
But everywhere has that. That's like
That's
not.
Yeah, exactly.
right. So
You know.
So yeah, I do want to read this because I think this is when I read this, I could not believe it. All right, so
Before we leave these first couple of paragraphs,
mm-hmm.
can I talk a little more? I just want to say one thing, which is that there's a lot of bad turns of phrase here. Like this have caused quite the stir, or drop the ball entirely. These are very old, tired metaphors. It's not very good writing to continue to include these. It makes it feel bland, right? Square peg to a round hole. We all know this, you know. It's not punchy. I'm just gonna say these are turns of phrase that should be used to punch up what you're saying, and they're not punchy. And this is a big problem in socialist writing.
Yeah,
for a lot, it has been, and it's my personal bugaboo. So that might be a racist term. I don't know.
Frankly, I may be a bit of a Chomsky person on this, where like I almost kind of don't mind being very boring in my writing, but I mean, I don't mind it if there's content there. But the thing is, this dryness or just like these like tired old phrases, it doesn't lead to anything. So it's not endearing in an old timey like fashion sort of sense. It's as you said, there's like certain like turns of phrases like that sound like stuff like somebody who read Lenin and then just has learned to just copy paste like certain terms. And it's like, oh, there you go. That makes it deep.
Yeah. Or there's a sentence here that we talked about.
Yes.
I find their analyses too miss the thrust of the Intifada and is too preoccupied by the idea that it is the product of revanchist blood and soil nationalism. I'm not. I think the is like grammatically incorrect. It should be and are too preoccupied because analyses is plural. But really, this is the sort of the thesis of the whole article.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really bad.
It's really bad, and like the thing is, I think I told you this before, but I think this whole article was not motivated by the actual first two articles that are linked at the start. This is motivated by online like pissy like fights, you know?
Because of course it is.
Yes, it is, and I don't mind that. You know, that can be a good motivator. But this whole like the product of revanchist and blood and soil nationalism, that is not what I read in the Angry Workers of the World, and that I'm fairly sure this is not what is in the ICT article. None of them use the term
blood and soil nationalism because these people are intelligent enough, angry workers of the world in the ICT, to like know that that's a specific term with a specific historical etymology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that it doesn't necessarily apply here, you know. Anyway, we should continue on past the first 10% of this
Yeah.
essay.
Oh, maybe there's like another little thing, like a phrase. So, I just like didn't get this. Is however, this analysis makes no sense for Palestine. Like it just like it talks about like revolutionary defeatism, whatever. But then he goes like, however, this analysis makes no sense for Palestine. The influence of the U.S., Qatar, and Iran is a result of a fundamental system in Palestine, and like they only serve to intensify what was already there and what will continue to be there without these actors. And
Continue. Make your point. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure why you would say this because I'm fairly sure that actors having influences like that would not invalidate what you just talked about in the previous paragraph. I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah. I do want to call out this little line. The working class defied all odds and ended World War One by having world historic revolutions in Germany and Russia. And it's like, well, did they really have? Are we really going to bat? I think are we really going to bat for the Weimar Constitution? You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, they would because they
would.
Yes, payday. Even if they're going to be like, it's not. It's all rosy, but and they're just going to vacillate because already there they have to until the It's just It's really weird. Yeah. Okay. So we can go past that, and then comes
some comparisons between Ireland, the United States, the classic. The Irish liberation question and a classic question of national oppression, which people are always bringing up in the context of national liberation, even though it's very different in a lot of ways.
I always felt that the Irish comparison was not very positive. Like, as far as talking about the nature of like, or whether or not we should be supporting this or that with regards to like national liberation related things, and I'm sure you guys will want to get into that term and how it's being used and such and such. But one thing that I think becomes very evident very quickly when you explore that subject is that Irish nationalism vacillated a lot in the history of Ireland and continues to, between having some vaguely left-wing qualities and some pretty right-wing qualities. It was.
Oh.
Well, okay.
The Fenians got her.
It's fine. We can fix this and anything. She'll return.
Sure.
Can we just do that?
Yeah. Blown up by the Fenians. Tragic. But I think it's like. I think the question of national liberation is something that's actually interesting to talk about.
Yeah, it very much is. It does interest me to figure that out because apparently people don't seem to have something just.
Look, I am by nature a kind of person who likes to entertain positions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like biased against the argument that there could be a role in national sovereignty.
Sorry, I disconnected there, didn't I? That was weird.
Yeah, we thought the IRA had killed you.
Yeah. Where did I leave off? The thing that I was going to say is, if you know anything about like the provisional IRA and the real IRA, which was the name of the organization, that formed after the provisional IRA was disbanded, then I think it becomes pretty evident that those aren't organizations that you should just uncritically want to emulate.
And in a way, it's sort of a, well, it's not one-to-one, but maybe we'll get into Hamas later. But yeah.
I think it's worth noting
Mm-hmm.
that what national liberation, what national sovereignty meant in the 19th century
Mm-hmm.
in the context of Ireland means something very different than it does, today, or especially in like a post World War II, post United Nations world, and even more so in like a post like neoliberal era world, right? Where, for me, and this has always been a sticking point when we talk about Palestinian nationalism and a Palestinian nation state, is that supporting the institutions of a nation state doesn't just mean, saying they should have a parliament and a constitution and a military and a police, all those cool communist things we love. But it also means entrance of Palestine, a Palestinian state, into the World Trade Organization, into, the World Bank, into the United Nations as a full member, right? And I think there's a real question about whether or not communists should support this, and by support I mean practically actively work towards it, and I think that I think the answer to that is no. I don't think that money, blood, sweat, tears, and gold should be used to further. What I do see is basically bourgeois goals, And so when I say like I don't support like the bourgeois liberal part of Palestinian nationalism, that's what I mean. That there are actual practical implications of being a state that people say national liberation, national sovereignty, self-determination, and all this stuff, which is certainly, the Palestinian people are oppressed as a nation, but at the same time, is the solution to national oppression really IMF like eligibility for IMF loans or United Nations voting capacity, right? Like I think we should be taking a very long
view, which communists, it seems, well, the left in general cannot take the long view because it makes us feel very impotent, and so it is very easy to just go with the flow, or just well, it's sort of, you might say it's kind of maybe like the same sort of logic that ends up motivating either the neo-Kauts or even the Radlibs, or just tailing the Democratic Party, I guess, or they tried to, but they're probably going to still continue even though Bernie didn't work. Obviously, it was probably not going to work unless they really really fucked up. But the moment they did that one call, everybody just sort of dropped out, and Biden just kind of chosen.
You just said red lips twice.
Yeah, I know, but
But
I'm giving
I
them
do-
more. I'm giving them more credit because I think they actually do read stuff. It's just they
Yeah.
I mean, they've read Newcastle have at least read 2 people, and then that's how they've
Yeah.
designed their thing. They've read McNair and then Larsley, and that's how they just orient entire politics, and then maybe some
Yeah.
other little things.
Yeah, I guess I kind of see that that similarity of that they're both kind of really kind of obsessed with seeming practical, right? Pragmatic. We need to focus on the here and now. We can't be larpers, right? I mean, it's most reformists will say oh, your revolution is never gonna come. Just improve the system as it is. It's really this aversion to looking more long term, like and incorporating that in your analysis of what we should do now. And I think that's a similarity that I do have with like the Cosmonaut people.
Mm.
I actually wanted to read bits from. Okay, this was really funny when I found this out. So, okay, so it's talking exactly, like pointing out. Well, I can read. So I'm just gonna read a quote. So Noel Ignatieff, with the help of Ted Allen, presents how.
By the way, hold on.
Yep.
Don't. He's referencing Theodore Allen. If you cite someone, don't diminuate their name. Just basic style guide thing, right? With the help
Yeah.
of Allen.
Yeah.
Don't refer to someone as Theodore and then Ted. You don't know them. You're not their friend.
Well,
I mean,
well, maybe the writer knew Ted Allen. Who knows? So, but anyways, yeah. So Noel Ignatieff, with the help of Ted Allen, presents how to understand this in terms of class politics, and it's just like it's talking about like the declassing and just oh god, there would be like so. I just tell people to just like read along to like know. We'll probably link it, but yeah. So that's okay. So it's just like quoting the Noel Ignatieff article. So quote. By racial oppression, I do not mean the ethnic or religious bias that exists widely, or inequalities among census groups defined by color or any other feature, but a system of oppression that incorporates by definition portions of the subordinate class in the subjugation of other members of that class, thereby constituting them as a race. The hallmark of racial oppression, as Ted Allen taught, is a reduction of every member of the subject group to a status beneath that of any member of the dominant group. Huck Finn's pop could push W.E. Du Bois off the sidewalk. And then, all right, here what comes next. I couldn't believe when I read this. All right, so that last scenario is not different than what is emerging in Sheikh Jarrah. Yanov Fauci, the settler from Long Island, New York. Fauci, yeah. The settler from Long Island, New York, describes himself as a tenant and is quite literally kicking Mohammed and Muna el-Kurd's family off the sidewalk. The system at hand in Palestine incorporates the Israeli working class in the subjugation of other members of a class, and in the microcosm of the home of Sheikh Jarrah, it is vital to it. So, all right. So, if you click the article linked about Fauci, like this guy was like a Trump anti-vaxxer, a very like vulgar person, probably not very pleasant. What do you find? What do you find in that article? That should tell you about his class position is that he literally has a therapist in which that helped him walk through his own anxieties about getting vaccinated, where he was like, it's with great great thought that I finally did get vaccinated, despite me just comparing vaccination to the Holocaust and having a yellow star in my Facebook profile and talking about how it's just like medical experiments in the Holocaust. So you get that kind of person. The Cosmonaut article goes from talking about this guy to then and just says the system
to describing him as a representative of the Israeli working class.
Yeah, and they just said that he's a settler from Long Island, New York. He's just coming in. And so,
regardless of whether or not the Israeli working class is like this guy,
mm-hmm.
the argument which draws this connection is there's no way to know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
There's no way for me to know anything from this article about the nature of the Israeli working class if I read it strictly, which is how I try to read.
Mm-hmm. And then what comes next? I don't know how much telling it is, but it just goes, okay, I'm just going to read it, okay? I'm just going to, because I want people to, know that I'm not just, trying to be cherry-picking. I think, this actually matters. So, quote, Amir Baksel describes whiteness in much the same way that I would describe how Zionism functions as a state ideology and the status it creates for Israeli Jews, a protection racket they use to provide material bonuses. It is minimally advantageous deal that the ruling class continuously renegotiates with a part of the working class. This much has been known for years. It's the base of how we understand the essence of the white race, However, Isabel Barksdale goes further and describes how whiteness functions as the face of declining material bonuses and the dire situation of the class for everyone. So, if you notice that paragraph, it goes from talking about whiteness to the essence of the white race, and then back to whiteness. These are not the same things. So, I mean, sloppy editing or just slip up, I don't know. But whiteness is not synonymous with the essence of the white race. I don't know what that's.
He's working in an intellectual sphere created by I believe Alan and some others, where I think he's using the terms. Alan was a much more of a Marxist than this author seems to believe, and so the whiteness here is used to be. Like he goes into this the freedom to not know or not care, which is as part of whiteness. He creates like this idea where being white is it gives you this privilege to not see your society falling apart, right? And then he shifts again to say that the Israeli worker doesn't want to see the Palestinians drive on the same roads as them or for them to be in the same market at all. And this is a very strange. It's a very strange kind of argument because we just have this metaphysical figure of the Israeli worker. I mean, it would still be problematic even if you backed it up with polling statistics talking about what is the Israeli working class, thinks about Palestinians. I'm sure they think like horrific things about Palestinians, but it would still be a bad argument to define class positions merely on the basis of opinions held by that class. If that makes any sense. This is still the most surface layer analysis possible. The most surface layer analysis that Marx gives us.
It's strange because this article just does end by saying it doesn't do moralism. It's not a moral. There's not a moral argument being made there, but then. Is that really true? I'm not ready to say that. Because, there seems to be, I think... Because I do think this, the issue that they have with Angry Workers of the World article is talking about Sheikh Sharat and, talking about the Palestinian petty bourgeoisie and just it feels like it really irks them on a moral level that someone can say that.
Yeah, it doesn't. If you read the Angry Workers of the World, they're not actually that hostile to the Israeli or the Palestinian middle class for fighting back. They don't. No. They just mention that this is the particular class character. And that, if you as a communist want to see more success, you should support making it more of a working class character, more of a proletarian character. And they describe, for example, Hamas banning the trade unions and stuff like that, And this seems to me to be a very similar position. But I think there's a group of people who see, especially claims of being petit bourgeois or middle class, as very offensive, As this is essentially the same thing as calling something fascist.
Almost. Well, and also for some reason, shouldn't it be offensive? Because Angry Workers of the World is literally describing how the Israeli middle class, petty bourgeois class has used COVID as a way to just encroach on the Palestinian middle class. And just get more out of them, and using the laws already on the books to just disappropriate them, and by doing so, they're proletarianizing the Palestinian middle class, right? So,
if I could just jump in with something here, sort of piggybacking off of something you guys were saying, it is very interesting to me because if you think about it, there's really one major reason that I can think of to oppose somebody making a claim that you have to admit is a factual claim. And I don't just mean a fact-based claim. I mean something that you admit is true. And the main reason I can think of to oppose a statement like that would be if you think it's being coded in some way. I mean, if you think it's wrong, then that's a sort of different problem. But if you think it's a coded statement, then all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense to be like, in the same way, like, if you hypothetically, not to get all Ben Shapiro, but hypothetically, let's say that you agree that transgender women are female, then it would make sense to agree with somebody, or sorry, if you agree that trans women are male, sexually, hypothetically, and I'm not saying that's my position, but hypothetically it would make sense to agree with somebody who throws that in your face and goes, "Oh, well, you're male," and you would go, "Yes, that's factual. Yes, thank you, I agree." Not that that's my position, but the main reason people oppose points like that is because it's coded as saying something about it. Like when somebody who's transphobic says that, you know that what they mean is you're not a woman. And if you make this claim about like the bourgeois character, then I think the only reason I can think of to really oppose that critique, because it is a pretty bland critique, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that I can't see finding it offensive.
I'm not even sure it's a critique, to be honest.
In the context of like the Angry Workers of the World article, is just to explain some dynamic.
I don't mean critique. I don't mean critique in a negative sense.
Yeah, I know.
I mean critique is just explaining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a thing that exists, and we'll talk about why. I think that's a critique. But it's weird to oppose that without some statement like, oh, maybe there's some like anti-Palestinian sentiment being coded into this. You could probably make that argument, but then you'd want to prove that. You'd want to evidence that. And it's just, that's not happening. So I don't understand. Like, and I don't mean that disingenuously. I am genuinely confused by people who disagree with this. And you guys are kind of explaining that very well, which I appreciate.
Well, from what I saw, yeah.
I think that the like a big reason why people make these claims is because they're used to an environment where a very online environment, very ironic for me as someone who spends a lot of time online, but a very online environment where every statement is a fight, where every disagreement is a cause for fight, for openly fighting, and especially where you see like on Twitch, right? Twitch debate streamers, where the goal is to just dunk on someone and make them feel, and make them, whatever. So if you're not agreeing with someone,
to make them look bad.
Yeah, if you're not agreeing with someone, or if you're bringing up some point, you're not doing it in a spirit of some kind of like intellectual questioning, right? You're not doing it to be to try to develop a certain dynamic or understand what's going on. You're doing it to make someone else look bad. So I think when this Cosmonaut guy sees these critiques of not even critiques, see someone say like, oh yeah, like this is a neighborhood of middle class professionals, right? Or says Hamas is like arresting dissidents, their reaction is to go, well, you're saying those things because you want to delegitimize the Palestinian struggle for freedom, or Palestinians fighting for their freedom. You are in support of Israel.
Oh, the article literally says this. You want to look? It says it literally. Okay, I want to quote. Yet Hamas lives rent-free in the minds of quote-unquote anti-national left of the anti-national left. To them, the crimes of Hamas are often enough to condemn the entire trust of the Intifada. What? Any criticism of the state of Israel is met with a demand to condemn Hamas. And here's the kicker. This is an oft-used tool in the Hasbara arsenal. Hasbara in Hebrew, if I remember, is propaganda. So it's a bit of Elyssa, you've talked about this before. Like online spaces where you just can short circuit somebody if they don't fall into like specific like dialogue trees, right? Where they don't know, and as you see, like that's kind of what happens. So you can't even just like state, you know, maybe the geopolitical like the geopolitical goals about from Hamas. Well, how they're getting influenced by Iran, all that, and how that might influence their behavior. Like, you can't state that.
I'm gonna hit the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back.
Like, you can't state that, and it's like, oh, there you go. You're just like repeating the U.S. state propaganda, and it's just it very easily short circuits somebody because all they know is from online debates or just like arguing with like dumbass Zionists, and then they just assume that like when anybody might bring up something similar, that there you go, you're doing you don't know that you're doing like Hasbara.
Yeah.
I think this kind of connects to what you said earlier about how this article is not really a response to like the article mentioned in the beginning, but like more just like Twitter debate stuff, and they try to kind of like legitimize it as something that's not just like Twitter stuff by mentioning those articles in the beginning.
Well, it's not just Twitter. There's probably some left book stuff too.
Yeah.
Because I know those Cosmonaut guys hang around left book.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I mean, what we do kind of here is just we're kind of honest, right? Like, oh, here we have something on Twitter. We're gonna talk about something we saw on Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't try to dress it up as something like more serious than it is. It's frustrating to see people kind of, yeah.
And
100% agree.
all right. So yeah, all right. Where we are?
Let's talk about the very funny Itamar Ben Gvir example he uses, and then
this was amazing.
And then we've been talking for a little, I think about an hour at this point, so maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So we should start.
42 minutes, yeah.
So we should start looking at looking at like the implications of this kind of article and what this article thinks about the world. You know. Do you want to do the honors on the very funny?
Yeah.
His very funny evidence that there are.
Well, there might be a little thing I want to point out that's just like, it just precedes that. But it's, I mean, I think it's just, I don't know, it just seems like cope, right? So that section where there's going to be the funny meme thing is called The Cross-Class Alliance of Zionism and the Israeli State. And it starts off by saying, Israel is not simply a capitalist state like the UK, to use an example. It is not anatomically or functionally the same. Again, anatomically, I don't know what the hell it's trying to say. It's an ethno-theocracy, and that is no exaggeration, and like
no bourgeois states have ever been theocratic or ethnic character.
The UK is imperialist and racist, no doubt, and worthy of its own list of crimes and inhumanities, yes. However, Israel is a settler colonial state through and through. This is not a moral category, it is an empirical one, and one which makes all the difference here.
They've been reiterating this point for
several times.
The entire article.
This article keeps...
Actually, that's very telling.
Yes,
this
it
is not a moral category, because that's how they're processing this entire issue.
Except that it is a moral...
When you have to deny that it's a... Because I didn't feel like the other articles were discussing it as a moral category. No. Although with the ICT...
ICT is always a bit of...
weird language, they're going to sound a little funky.
Yeah. So there's that, and then like there's they quote Ignatieff about like a pure capitalist mode of production. Like I don't even want to take about that. But okay, what comes next? All right, quote: "It is exceptional as a settler ethno-state at every turn, rather anomalous." Again, like the state is not even the same on paper. It is a multi-Zionist party, de facto republic with no constitution. Only parties which espouse some form of Zionism are legally able to operate it. It is defined as the state of the Jewish people worldwide, not even within its borders, which, by the way, it has never defined. And There are no civil marriages. Interracial marriage is illegal. There's not even a recognized Israeli nationality, as this would undermine the idea of a Jewish statehood and therefore the entire Zionist project. So when I read this, it just mentioned the UK, and it adds, that it's a multi-Zionist party de facto republic, comma, with no constitution. And
The United Kingdom
and it just
very famously has an unwritten constitution.
And
Israel, as a former British colony, maintains that parliamentary tradition of unwritten constitutions, which you would know if you knew literally anything about Israel.
Yeah, and it keeps saying, it is exceptional as a settler ethno-state. Source? Explain, these couple of, sentences, you could take the first sentence, it is exceptional as a settler ethno-state, at every turn rather anomalous. You could write 1, 2, 3 paragraphs to explain what that means. But no, you have to take my word for it. The state is not even...
sounds impressive, doesn't it? At every turn anomalous.
At every turn anomalous. Anomalous. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to have to fucking say it. Sometimes, especially with what's coming, this is it's going to be very funny once we get to the joke, but,
SCP 1948 is
at every turn anomalous.
is a highly anomalous.
Yeah, it's I just, I don't...
To me, the thrust of this article, with the declassing of the Palestinians and the idea that the entire Israeli society is united behind the Zionist project, which we're going to get to in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
To me, and this is what I find two things really offensive about this article. First is that in the light of what this article is saying, the implication to me appears to be that this is a national war with no cleavages for communist politics, the politics of class solidarity against the nation to make their appearance. In which case, it's a national or even a racial war between Israelis and Palestinians, between Jews and Arabs, that can only be ended, as far as this article seems to be aware, with a military conflict between these two forces. And the problem I have with that is twofold. First, we know Israel would win because they have more international support and military power. And two, if that's the case, why should we care? Why should we as communists care what happens between two nations that are entirely constituted as nations, that ask us, supporting either one, only to throw away our communist principles and support them for moral reasons? If this is the case, if the Arab-Israeli conflict is a race war, then I don't understand why communists should have any kind of position beyond I hope they have fun. And the other one is that
communism is predicated on moralism, then.
Yeah. Or if you hold any position, you don't hold it as a communist, I should say.
I mean, it's very well. Okay, no, we have to do the phrenology.
It should go
thing.
without saying. Yeah. It should go without saying, by the way, that the other one is something I talked about in a tweet, which is that this article just tells you. But this, I just want to be clear that I don't believe it's a race war.
Yeah. I don't, but this. It seems, okay. But we're going to do the phrenology meme, all right? And then after
let's
that,
have fun.
There's going to be a very poignant passage that we might have to pour over before we get to the last bit. Okay. So, it's just of course, it starts to argue with Angry Workers of the World about, how many, poor Israelis are, and then they just, they try to just, It just is about trying to explain there's so many layers of possible Jews in Israel, and there's the religious Jews, and so, and then here's the funny part. All right, it comes, quote, "Today we see Beta Israel and Mizrahi Jews in every echelon of Israeli society. There's a myth that somehow non-European Jews are at the periphery of Zionism. What Itmar Ben-Gvir, the most hardline Zionist in the Knesset by far, is Iraqi and Kurdish, and looks like this. We need to adjust our understanding of Zionist alliance in Israel." And then literally puts his picture. His picture where he has this little cap on, and he's just, I guess he looks
This
But
swarthy Arab.
yeah.
Well, it's literally doing that bit that people do in reverse, where the alt writers are like, oh, so and so, like these different congressmen look Jewish, therefore Jews
Mhm.
control the government.
Look, and like
It's like you think America is racist, but what about Colin Powell, huh? What about Condoleezza Rice? What about Barack Obama?
which I I don't know who the editor is, but I'm fairly sure if I was to like be an editor, I don't even have to agree with what the text is saying, but being what is the point of being and looks like this and just post a picture just there. It's like there you go. That's like instead of like citing something, I'm just gonna post a picture, and apparently that's gonna make my argument for that like there's like some sort of like very almost unitary unity between like Zionists, like the Zionist project and Jews and just in Israel. Like I don't know what the point of like that picture is other than like, oh, look at the swarthy Jew. I guess we're not just like dealing with like, I don't know. Well, Netanyahu was born in the U.S., right? And he was like, he was
It's from Philadelphia.
yeah. Apparently from in a very racist family too, which isn't exactly surprising. Isn't exactly surprising, and might explain how he treated Obama during the Iran deal. But yeah, do you remember that when he just like walked to the U.S. Congress and just kind of just tried to scuttle everything, but it didn't actually work. Well, yeah. All right, so.
All right.
So what you were talking about, Bang, this article kind of pretty much states it, you know? I mean, because what it says, right? So when Bang was talking, like, like this article seems to like say it's gonna be a fucking race war. Like, I just want to read this, and you need to like fucking tell me what this like is supposed to mean, practically, right? Quote: Zionism is not a quote tool of the Israeli bourgeoisie, is a weapon in the hands of the Israeli working class. The Zionist state is not simply a false consciousness, as its support has its basis in real conditions of life, and therefore will not be overcome by simple appeals to reason and unity. It is supported by a much more formidable cross-class alliance than that of Palestine. Israeli Jewish workers benefit from this alliance, even if they might benefit more from communism. The most pertinent point is that for revolutionary strategists, damn, Cosmonaut magazine, the key problem is not the Zionism of the employing class, but the Zionism of the Israeli worker. The boss's Zionism is a given. It will always be in his class interest. It is the support for Zionism by the Israeli worker that represents the chief obstacle to the demands of the Palestinian proletariat and the world revolution, not the Israeli bourgeoisie. End quote. Like,
Yeah, there's no
so
there's no position that can be taken here that yeah, there's no position that can be taken here beyond national war, you know?
yeah, because like yes, and it's like if that's your position, then just like it's almost here's what I think. Like when I read this, I feel like they almost want to say let's have Algeria 2.0. Is that wrong to think that? Is that like?
I mean, I don't have any particular high hopes for the Palestinian situation.
Me neither.
I don't.
It's,
you know,
it's dire. Like it is. It is dire. Like we have to be honest about that. And I feel like
it may be that the Israeli working class, cannot fight except, this all may be true. I don't think that means that as communists we don't have to, I don't think this means that communists should abandon communism, because on the national line, if we just take the national military, conflict line, then obviously Israel wins and kills all the Palestinians. I mean, there isn't like this guy tries to like gussy up the situation, but if it's a purely military question of fighting between two factions, it's over, man. You may as well give up.
And like,
You
who's
know?
gonna? I almost feel like, maybe like, a quote unquote charitable reading of this is that they want an intifada to start, and they think that like maybe like the international community will take pity and might actually do something, or like I like that's your only like.
And this is the part that I found that I had a real problem with this article is that it really seems to be basically from the position of someone in the United States telling the Palestinian working class that they should just ignore all those gripes they have with Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. They should just commit to the Intifada. They should just commit to just fighting on national grounds, and things will probably work out, or not. Like it's a very I think it's a very cowardly position to take, especially if you're someone who has no skin in the game.
Yeah. Well, the paragraph I remember you quoted on Twitter, right? It was this. So this was after the Hasbara quote that I read earlier. So this continues, right? Without getting into too many specifics, I think the influence and power of Hamas are too commonly overstated. Angry workers of the world give little to no attention to the other two important forces in Palestine, Fatah and UNRWA. I have no special love for any of these groups. However, if anything has been seen, it's that moments like the present have a tendency to create a kind of rupture by which all previous bets come off. No one and nothing should be off limit to ruthless critique. But ultimately, the decision does not rest with us. So when angry workers of the world decouple the Palestinian people from the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and point to the lack of support the PA actually has, it does not make sense to then continue to overstate it. It makes more sense to fan the flames of Intifada and leave the rest to come out in the wash. And the reason Bang got started on this in the first place...
The bloody wash.
Yeah, it's really cynical, and but the reason he brought this up on Twitter in the first place is you probably read this, and then you saw there was a what was it exactly, Constance? There was the Palestinian Authority was suppressing a demonstration, I think. And then
the Palestine, and I posted hey, maybe Cosmonaut, because I remember that they had this specific point in their article about how leftists should be nicer to the Palestinian Authority. And I said, maybe this is because the ICT sent all their articles to Palestine and Cosmonaut didn't get a chance. So maybe you guys should send some out so they can know the correct national line. And they got mad at me. They're like, "Who says we support the Palestinian Authority?" And it's like, well, that's such a fucking coward's way out to,
It's yeah. It's like, I don't have any specific love for them, but don't be too mean to them. And just if you're gonna bring up bring up a bit later when something happens and the Palestinian Authority does something bad, make sure not bring up the fact that I told people to not overstate how bad they are. But and it's just then why have this position if you can't carry it through? That's what it means. If you're going to say, we shouldn't be too critical of the PA, if somebody's going to bring up, the PA is doing something bad, it should be, yep, I know. Well, it sucks, but my strategic line is to not critique them too much, unless very much needed. So, indeed, it is the coward's way out, because you're writing this stuff, and then when something inconvenient happens, you're just gonna be backpedaling. It's not how, and it becomes very funny by the end.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what are the takeaways from this? Do you think?
Well, I would say that Cosmonaut should maybe pay their writers if they want actually good stuff, but they're not very that's not their business model, I've heard. So but no, okay, seriously, without the petty stuff, I mean, through lines are important. If you keep having to restate what your argument is what you want to discuss, or what your argument is, and restate it several times in like in several different paragraphs, but then like I've read it 2 times, and I cannot for the life of me repeat the actual argument being made, because it's talking about declassing, and like the national like what do you think about it? It's so confusing. Okay, so it starts off with the intifada, right? But then it doesn't define it. It just like it throws it out there.
You have to define the terms you use in your problématique.
Oh my god! But I mean, they should explain what they mean, because that word might like, you know, there's been at least like 2 intifadas, and you're trying to like, you want to have a third one, and you know, like maybe discuss what the first and the second are, and maybe like you could literally just you could be the biggest suit and just be like, thesis, first intifada, antithesis, second intifada, synthesis. Like you could literally do that, and I would be happy because things would be clear. I would know what you're talking about, even if it's like, you know, just. But there's nothing there, and and like that's like part of the article. Like they want to have an intifada. Why? Because there's like something irreconcilable about like the structure of like Israeli society in the state, where like Israeli workers are too wed to the Zionism, right? And they and there's like, and it just goes into how like all the avenues of like maybe just like, well, you know, like collaboration between the 2 working classes are closed off legally and practically. But then instead of being like, you know, like
This is something to overcome. This is a problem that we have to overcome, you know.
Yeah. And the way to
They just
overcome
rip
it,
off the Israeli working class. They just say, well, there's no chance. So we just have to have all the Palestinian working class throw themselves against the machine guns until.
yeah, basically, and they get like they get like very indignant about like, you know, angry workers of the world talking about like the Palestinian like middle class, right? And is just and they just like, well, they just like outright say it. Quote, the middle class in Palestine is hardly a real middle class. That's what they say, and like they keep like, it's just their whole thing about like the declassing is like, even when that's true, it's not an on and off switch. What do you think Shak Sharat is about? It is declassing, right? They're trying to like take these like this middle class neighborhood and just, but it's so confused. So what I would say is, you don't need to pad an article out if you have nothing to say or nothing clear to say. Just think about it. Because when I read the Angry Workers of the World, or even like the ICT that I skimmed, I get what they're saying. Here, it is confused. There's not a coherence. And whatever through line that I can find at the start of the text that gets repeated, like, nothing is proven or just like, you know, even just stated. Okay, this is like how we should approach, you know, this problem. If we take the analysis of the article at face value, there's nothing. It's just like, and
well, there's rupture. There's moments of rupture in which anything is possible, even though there was no actual. Even though the Sheikh Jarrah protests. Look, I don't believe that this actually like denigrates anybody to say there was nothing like especially crazy about the Sheikh Jarrah protests. Like there was no like it wasn't like a complete rupture with like the political social discourse between Israel and Palestine that had happened before, right? Like.
Well, it went viral, right? And there was like even the guy who went on like CNN and then like immediately got evicted. So it was, the thing is, here it was very viral on social media, but then that's.
I would say there's rupture with what came before, and anything is possible.
It's just a clear case example, right? That's exactly the point of the Angry Workers of the World. Like, okay, this is like a case example of just things that have been accelerating ever since like COVID. But all the laws that are being used to do this are either already on the books or they're getting boosted a bit like juiced up. And like that's there's no rupture going on fundamentally. I guess, like, if you want to talk about rupture, I guess you could say, well, maybe like on the high holy day of Islam, maybe like sending in the Israeli
Rupture is a philosophical term that you need to define.
but like you would think maybe like the rupture could have been like, oh, maybe sending, you know, the Israeli cops or military on the holy day of Islam into like you know, the historic mosque. Maybe that was like that was like, whoa, okay, that like there's like a flagrancy by which, like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make like
They're just saying rupture because it makes it sound like things are changing.
but they're not
You know?
changing. There's another ceasefire. It's like it's all the same all over again.
Yeah.
Because, like, okay, there's like a ceasefire, like the Hamas and Israel just stop, because Israel is never going to do a ground invasion on Gaza, because then that would mean like a bunch of like military casualties, because you're walking into a death trap basically. Because and then like so basically what they do is, I mean, they kind of admitted it too, that they just were really fucking frustrated and were just like shelling buildings and just having fun destructing it, doing destruction. Well, they weren't. Well, maybe at the start they started having fun, but then they realized, oh shit, it's going to be, quote, another military defeat, because, well, they can keep destroying Gaza over and over again.
But the Palestinians are going to keep fighting them because, so you this is the term is German Vernichtungskrieg, extermination war. And it is essentially a war waged by a state power against the entire civilian population of another state. And in this kind of scenario, you can expect, you know, you put yourself in a position where you have no way to effectively surrender.
Well, it's like, so there's like half the population in Gaza are children. It's like 1 million. Like they're like, it's 18 and under basically. And like most are drinking, like 97% of the drinking water is like, it's basically spoiled. So like they have nothing to lose. Like and like why? And basically they're stuck at a standstill where Gaza is already unlivable. It's going to become more and more unlivable. And so what's going to happen? What's going to happen is, and I mean, at some point, something's going to have to break. That's going to be the real rupture, when Israel has reached a point where it's like, okay, let's start like, it's hard to imagine, but at some point, what do you do? Like,
You can't just exterminate millions of people. It's not a simple process.
yeah,
You know, there are millions of Palestinians. You know, that's.
What was that German term again?
Sorry?
What was that German term again?
Vernichtungskrieg? I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's used very commonly in World War II scholarship to refer to the war in the East. I believe it was used by German sources at some point.
Where it was basically an
war of annihilation.
Yeah,
Extermination.
a war of annihilation.
the extermination war against the Slavic peoples, and just they want to make a new living space, right? They want to, especially the very coveted, the very fertile lands in Ukraine, I guess, and other places.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and that's... So having said that, right? So the fact that we're even like talking about like, you know, war of annihilation, extermination, and we're just like sort of like, okay, we're kind of like a standstill, like what the fuck can happen next? Because this keeps happening. We're always like, it's gonna be, something's gonna happen, Hamas can get provoked and is gonna fire missiles, and then it's just gonna become like another like mowing the lawn. Mowing the lawn, by the way, is, for people who don't know, that's kind of an accepted like term that's used in the Israeli press to talk about what they do to Gaza every few years, mowing the lawn. So there's that. Okay, and then want to know how the article ends? All right. And I cannot. When I read this, I again, my jaw dropped. All right. So quote. Why does the left need to ask what quote unquote national liberation looks like in practice, end quote, when all the practices are here before us, question mark. It looks like the broken glass in front of Israeli consulates, comrades de-arresting each other, blockades and sieges. It is unpermitted marches across the world. It is the breaking of police lines. It is cargo unloaded and refused. Can I ask the question that I asked. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you tell me which thing is not like the other before I finish my song? Can you guess which it is?
Feel free to enlighten me.
Well, basically, it was Italian dock workers that were blocking the shipping of Israeli weapons. Pretty much everything is like, we broke... coincidentally broke glass of the Israeli consulate in Montreal, or just so it's just like repeating every cliche of like quote unquote left activism there is, and it's just like national liberation looks like in practice, and you call yourself a fucking materialist? Are you serious? Like, what the fuck? This is just this like
there we go.
I can't what does this mean? This is like, these people would like go on Twitter and make fun of anarchists for saying the exact same thing. They would just be like, oh, look at how impotent they are. They don't know the benefits of like organization. They just need to do a rereading of the Second International and just like meld it with like the good bits of the Third International, and then they would know that everything is it's just like, what?
It's like this is all you can offer, you know. And it is all you can offer as long as you're restricted by the narrow horizon of national liberation, and it is a very narrow horizon. And it is the reason why I've been belaboring this point about like then it's just a national war, then it's just a race war. Is that as long as you are in this sort of vision of the nation, it's a complete fantasy. I mean, they don't like to talk about like the Palestine. They don't support Hamas. They don't support Fatah. They don't support the Palestinian Authority. They don't support the Palestinian, Liberation Organization. There's nothing there to support anymore, right? As a socialist, you don't really like Fatah or like social democratic like right wing traitors or whatever, and everybody. Hamas are radicals, but they're also Islamic. They're also like Islamists, right? They're like right wingers and conservatives, to simplify a complex position. The PLO basically doesn't exist. The PFLP basically doesn't exist. So you support on the grounds of it being more realistic, on the grounds of it being more, politically viable, a nationalism that corresponds to no nation, that corresponds to no actual nationalist organization. Right. You just support it in the abstract. It's as fantastic. I would if you said, I believe Hamas can win this war, so I support Hamas, I would respect that as a position.
Yeah, that's a position.
That's a position you can take, and you can say, well, I can say like, well, I disagree, but I actually accept that this is a position that exists. Whereas if you just say, oh, I support Palestinian national liberation, what are the borders of this Palestinian state, right? What's its government look like? Who's in it?
And what
presumably,
and what happens after? Like,
presumably you don't support a Palestinian state governed by the Cosmonaut editorial board, right? Like you have to have some actual Palestinians that exist to who agree with your dream.
Yeah, and like,
I think Parkinson talked to me about a pan-Middle Eastern socialist republic that he wanted.
Yeah, which is like, again, that's another position. But now you have to
Autism, but cool this time.
Well, again, that's like an actual like position to be like, okay, like this like cannot be solved within the confines of Israel-Palestine. We need like some sort of like revolutionary socialist bloc republic or whatever in the Middle East. That's a position. Not this. Not being like, see, when we break a window and we de-arrest each other and we just like do like, you know, everything, you know, like people like, it's the sort of thing that like maybe like Blockbusters with like a soy face over the back in the day. It's like unpermitted marches across the world. It's breaking police lines.
Illegal marches? Holy
Illegal
shit,
marches?
bro.
Oh, so you're telling me that back a few years ago when there was like the student protests over here, we were doing national liberation advocacy by marching against like the police while they were like trying to just like, you know, beat us up for like not wanting higher tuition fees. Like, no, like what? Like that's not.
You're fighting for the liberation of the Canadian nation.
No, for the Quebec. Well, maybe actually.
Quebecois nation.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the broken glass one is the funniest.
It's so funny. It is so funny because like it's like the you know, in a way, when you think about it, you know, you remember those oh god, what do you call them? You know, the Extinction Rebellion. You know how they just they make a show out of breaking glass and getting arrested.
Yeah, and then they let themselves get arrested, and then like
it's all like so when Cosmonaut sees that or whatever this author like has in his brain to just write that, he's like, you know what they should do instead? They should break the window and like not get arrested, or if they get arrested, comrades will de-arrest each other.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which is why I think that you genuinely do need to be, if you want a real settlement in this issue. You know, Marx wrote a book about 180 years ago called On the Jewish Question, where he talks about this question of civil rights in Germany, and he says, you know, if we argue for like civil rights on like national or liberal grounds, or specifically like civil rights as such, you know, essentially what we're doing is we're asking for like a juridical solution to a problem that emerges from the fundamental structure of civil society. And I think that a lot of the Cosmonaut stuff really falls into that play, where they're like, you know, we really need to be like supporting like something that exists in the context of civil society, right? Something that exists in the context of capitalist bourgeois existence, instead of something that actually exists in the context of like a real, you know, of a real struggle, instead of actually getting past the problem. You know what I mean? Like getting past the fundamentals that result in this oppression of Palestinians is capitalism. You know, and it's rote to say it, but it is because Israel occupies a particular place within capitalist world hegemony, or whatever you want to, bourgeois civil society is what I prefer to say these days. But it doesn't, you know, there also isn't anything you don't get clicks for saying this. That's why the ICT article is very bland, right? Because it's nothing that hasn't been said for like 200 years, right?
Yeah. And also
all problems are solved.
Yeah, an Angry Workers of the World article, if I remember, does say something like, you know, directly that like Israel is used as, you know, a sort of well, it's used as it's like raison d'être for the U.S. is, you know, as a point of like being able to enable their imperial it's an imperial checkpoint basically, and the Palestinian Authority is there to just keep a minimum of stability, because of course like you can't, it's hard to like do what the U.S. has in mind for trade or whatever if like the whole fucking region would like have like some sort of second 7-day war, whatever you call it. Yeah.
What do you think about the last line? Because it baffles me a bit.
The what? The
last line of the article.
Oh yeah, I remember this. Well, here I'll read the last paragraph of the article, I guess, right? So, quote: regardless of whatever cross-class fronts permeate, the ultimate demands of the Palestinian people have always been fundamentally proletarian: the right of return, the freedom of movement, the crumbling of walls. These are things every worker must fight for. An attack on any one of these things is an attack on the class everywhere. The Palestinian working class continues to defy all odds. If renewal is possible, it is possible with them.
The classic working class position. Fuck walls. I'm sorry. I know it's a metaphor. I know they're speaking
Yeah.
metaphorically, but don't. Okay?
But like, what are they referring to with like the Palestinian working class continues to defy all odds? Like,
So
They're
how?
doing exactly what I mean. Like they haven't broken out of the particular formulation that's leading to their genocide, and that's their goal. You know. And I hate
Yeah,
to say it because it sucks, but you know.
I mean, what? Yeah, like what? Like conclusion? Like I've tried to like figure this out, and I'm like, wait, could it be possible at some point that like Israel is gonna like literally just like fucking bribe other nations to just like do like a population transfer again? But then those nations don't want Palestinians. In fact, like there's, it's actually funny. Young told me a lot about this. How like basically Palestinians and like other Arab countries in the sort are basically like treated like cockroaches. Like the way that like the press talks about them is not one on one with like quote unquote anti-Semitic stereotypes, but they're definitely seen as like interlopers or like they're like they're, sneaky. They're after our money. It's just really yeah, it's very dire. So
As
like,
Marx told us 175 years ago or something, society continually produces this image of the Jew out of its own entrails. I say this image of the Jew because he's not talking about literal like Jews.
yeah,
He's talking about like anti-Semitic.
Yeah, it's from the those yikesy quotes that people bring up from that, where he's sort of like he's taking that Bauer's like own argument and just like runs it through just to own him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else to say about this?
To be clear, I don't think Marx necessarily liked Jews very much. I just think he didn't want to like get rid of them.
He wasn't Proudhon who wanted to like basically expulse them from France or maybe like exterminate them. And I don't think he thought that Jews just like run the state.
He just really what it is that he was like anti-religious because he was a 19th century intellectual, and so yeah.
And the complex about like being from a Protestant family that was like that were converted Jews and whatever went on there.
Yeah.
And
We should do a whole episode on the Jewish question. It's probably my favorite, most important Marx text.
which is
I've heard good things.
Mm-hmm. And there's also, if I remember, there's a quote about like circumcision and capital that's like used as like a metaphor, and it's sort of like it kind of jumps out at you, but then the metaphor actually kind of makes a bit of sense in the way it's used, but still,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But yeah, I mean that could be a good episode.
Some great.
Is there?
Great citation, by the way. There's absolutely no. This
Yeah.
isn't like a bibliography. This is another thing that I think is important to like round off, is that if you're gonna make do a discussion that has like, if you're gonna write a thing that has like a discussion like this, you really need your citations to be in a proper academic format. I really hate having to explain this to a grown man with his own website, but it's got to be an academic format, my dude. It's
Yeah.
got to be
It's basically for further reading, and it's just like linking.
further reading, name the title, a name of author, and works.
It's redundant because stuff that gets cited inside the article is just
Is linked to the article.
Yeah. Oh, and funny. Okay, I almost forgot about this. There's a time where it wait, let me find it. Oh yeah, summary of the argument of the invention of the white race, right? Inside the article, you click it, and it doesn't work. You want to know why? Because there's an L missing in HTML, which tells me that whoever edited this did not re-click every link to make sure it actually worked. But what's funny is this very same article gets, in the further reading section is copy pasted and wait. Okay.
There's a few errors. I don't like to blame. There's a few like dropped articles and stuff. I don't like to blame like authors for this, speaking as a writer, because it's almost never their fault. You're writing a ton of shit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not extremely conducive to getting everything right. That's really the responsibility of the editor to go over this, to
And
read through it, to
this has
check the
been-
links.
Okay, it's we are on the 27th, right? This was published almost 11 days ago. So you're telling me no one told them that link was broken, which is an easy fix. It's an L.
There's a couple of dead links, like the internationalism. The one at the beginning doesn't work. And really, I understand like the links on an article breaking eventually,
Well, it's
but
not- it's not even- it's not even
after less
broken.
than 2 weeks.
The ICT isn't even broken. It's just links to the About Us. It's not even
It's-
like a redirect. It's literally
It's-
it's not pointing to the actual article that the neither Israel nor Palestine, no war but class war. Like I found it by just like clicking, googling ICT Palestine. That's how I found it.
I have to say,
of the-
as far as like evidence for their beliefs and things like that, every fucking person, not every person, half the people who engage in this conversation acts like YouTubers. Doesn't matter whether they're Twitter users or they write for a website or something. They just act like you could just link stuff, and it's like, yeah, well, evidence. What do you want?
Yeah, you do have
I
to.
also want to mention that like I clicked the link of that works below the article, a summary of the argument of the invention of the white race, and it's not secure. So like I looked it up, and there is a secure link out there. They just went for like the highest up thing, and they didn't even bother thinking like, oh, am I gonna link someone to a site that's actually connected securely?
Huh.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's weird.
Yeah.
Like,
All this.
I'd like to move on now, if we're okay
Check.
with that.
Yeah. Okay, so we can close.
I want to do at least one more smaller thing
We can-
for everyone's entertainment.
We can close off maybe this recording, I guess, or we're gonna keep it all together.
Yeah, we'll stay
no,
all
we
together.
can-
What do you want to?
Sure.
Let's keep it together, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We do so many recordings that it's like an hour and a half, an hour 45, that it's just like, all right.
You're basically an hour and a half right now. Yeah.
It stays in the... So yeah, I would really like to talk about that Gammy shit. Those fucking tweets.
God.
Which tweets? Because I've only come across her like a couple of weeks ago, and
Yes.
Well,
funnily
Yes.
enough,
just noting she retweets a lot of pro-Israel stuff.
oh, of course. Why am I not surprised? She's probably like of course the barbarian Arabs are particularly. I don't know what she'd say. Though it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
The pink washing that happens about Israel, and like they don't even have gay marriage legalized. You have to like go to another country and just go through a bunch of loops to even get that, and it's just like, yeah. Anyways,
I mean, I'm not sure what precisely what kind of gammy tweets you wanted to talk about, but there was in kind of the same sphere. I think one of her like friends or whatever.
I just remember
I
during
got
the Kink and Pride discourse, right? She was blatantly misgendering Demon Mama, and I just pointed out, and I just like the gun silencer meme. So it's like the T slur, and it's just the they them the silencer. So I just
There's more instances of her misgendering people and also justifying
it's
other people misgendering people.
yeah.
But like, there was this one thing I responded to, and I think it was one of her friends or something. Coincidentally, she has like adult human female in the bio, and this is just like a person in like the soft sphere of Twitter, and I mean basically, I'll not summarize. I'll summarize a bit of of the back and forth here, because like it's more or less, someone started out with like a tweet, screenshot of Riley Grace Rochon,
Yeah.
which is like prominent trans medicalist lawyer person on.
Why is it always
I mean, I'm not
lawyers?
sure if she's even a lawyer yet, uh,
Law school,
but like,
apparently. But yeah.
yeah, kind of a debate kind of streamer, and yeah, someone essentially screenshotted her, and she and it was about like, um, yeah, Riley is an idiot and fundamentally views her transness as a burden. You can choose to be trans for a whole host of reasons, one of them being political. A trait does not have to be immutable to be worthy of protecting. No, I mean that's a perfectly fine tweet, I think. I,
I
I
agree.
mean, I think it's hard to really disagree with that. You really have to grasp at straws or just like interpret it in like, I mean, in a fashion that would have you like, I mean, that's necessarily antagonistic, right? And someone quote tweeted that with like, if you're choosing to be trans for political reasons, you are unironically just looking for attention,
Which is.
which is like weird because if I talk to a friend, I'm looking for attention, right?
Hmm.
Am I not? Like,
I mean,
this is,
existing is looking for attention in a way.
yeah, I mean,
What? It,
it's,
that's such a that was always the thing that people said about, I mean, loads of trans people, that if you're non-binary, you're looking for attention, etc., etc. And I understand the
yeah,
point that, oh, if you're trying to make a political point, then you're looking for attention. And my answer to that would be, so fucking what? You got something to say to me? I mean, not that that's me, but like, what the? Okay, and
yeah, I mean, I think it's weird because like one aspect of um, like being validated in like your um gender identity is kind of like being seen, which kind of involves attention, right? Like
Hmm.
being seen as the gender you are necessarily involves attention. So I'm not sure how this person think kind of decouple that from uh yeah, from like being trans or like just social interactions in general. And a little further up they go like, the idea that you see being trans as just another quirky label is kind of sad. You should be trans because you believe you do not belong to the gender you were assigned at birth, not for political reasons. Thank you very much. And I mean, I kind of quote tweeted that with like, I searched the photo of like the woman who with her like who in the park strangled her dog and then called the police for a black man like filming her, right? And
Hmm.
I captioned it with 911, someone's being trans for the wrong reasons. Please help. And I do think that's kind of an apt comparison, but it's like how is anyone else like identifying for as trans for a reason you might, I mean, not understand. Let's be charitable. Like, how is that a problem? I don't quite see it.
It isn't.
Like, I think it's kind of a Karen kind of attitude.
Karen.
Yeah,
no, you're 100% right. Who care?
yeah. I think it's really strange to me because in this whole social democrat sphere, from what I've observed, I used to be like a lot more involved in that sphere, right? Like, not that I was like a social democrat, because back when I was a social democrat, I wasn't even on this whole broader Twitter sphere. But like the kind of social democrat sphere, they're very tolerant of transmedicalism and all the transphobic behavior that's associated,
Yeah,
like
well,
which is
they love debate streaming, and the point of debate streaming is to win an argument or appear that you have. And in order to do that, I mean, you have to use what you think are the best arguments. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, it means the truth doesn't really matter. And this is something that a lot of people get wrong. The truth doesn't matter in those arguments. Looking good matters. Appearing strong matters. The truth doesn't really matter.
yeah, that's kind of too what I've gotten in like one other article. I can't find it now probably, but like what it came down to was I was talking to someone and I was trying to get them to like engage with my points, and they just kept going like, but like this, how will this convince transphobes? How will this convince transphobes? And at some point, I'm thinking like, what if like what if what convinces transphobes isn't true, right? What if what convinces transphobes isn't accurate, or what if it harms me, right? Doesn't that matter, right? No, it doesn't, because it's just like focused on like debating liberation into existence. It's so impotent.
Yeah, well, I mean, can I say it's idealist to think that if everybody just had the right ideas, things would change? Can I
Well,
say that?
that's not technically what idealism is, but I suppose you're allowed.
Yeah, I really I'm frustrated by this kind of, because like I think it's largely um like it's largely just a worldview that's formed by just like watching these debaters, right? Like you watch these debaters, you watch them hash out the issues, you come to a position, and then you think that, like, even if you won't admit it, in your arguments, what follows from what you say is essentially that, like, we need to debate liberation into existence, and if an argument isn't conducive to like convincing a transphobe, it's not good. It doesn't matter how accurate it is. The flaws with like uh, the argument that is good to convince transphobe doesn't matter. It's just about like convincing them, which I should note, it doesn't even work, because like if I mean you can convince a transphobe that they're wrong if they're already kind of primed to be favorable to what you're saying, right? Like, so if you
Yeah,
have
someone who's
like,
actively transphobic is not going to have a conversation with a trans person and go, "Wow,
yeah,
that was a really enlightening conversation. I think I've learned a lot and I've decided to readjust the blog spot I've been feverishly keeping up for the past 6 years." You know what I mean?
yeah, I think it kind of ignores how people actually change their minds,
And I
because
think
like,
And
talking to
also,
people in real life is probably more conducive than talking to people on the internet as
yeah,
far as changing minds goes.
and
yeah,
also
I think,
it always overestimates like the relevancy and like the potency of being able to just talk people out of this stuff. Like it doesn't like it's the whole flaw with the whole like the debate bro or just that whole mindset is that a lot of times the arguments aren't exactly what pushes people away from these positions. it can be like maybe an interaction or just being exposed to something, but a lot of times like it's these people don't exactly the people that can be changed are not very vocal. They just like watch and they absorb stuff.
Yeah, I think what happens a lot is that like you have some kind of family member that's kind of transphobic, right? And then I mean, maybe through like other supportive family members, they're kind of trying to like really listen to you and really like they're kind of trying to like uh, put their decide that they're more invested in like building a good relationship with you than they are in like upholding their transphobic positions. And when you then have a conversation, then you can reach them because they've already decided beforehand, like, okay, I'm really going to try to understand what you're saying here and why this is like, yeah, why this is important to you. But like an active transphobe, which is like online, most in online debate stuff, you're incentivized to like have an active position. If you kind of falter on something, like, uh, I don't know, I'm open to like whatever point of view. Like you're not taken seriously as a debater because you have to have a take on everything.
Mm-hmm. That's always that doesn't lead to a good place intellectually. I don't think. I think people should learn.
Yeah.
I think people should learn the virtue of silence sometimes.
Yeah,
Like not
yeah,
just being like, oh, because like I literally just will never be able to talk about this. But like if you actually like, I don't know, if you want to talk about something, just like try to read up on it. Try to find people that you can at least like you can look at them go right and just sort of like see how these like arguments go. If like I don't know, there's like many ways of just like trying to approach these things. Like, yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's also kind of an like like I said, there's kind of an incentive to like not engage with like the arguments that way because like you get more viewers if you present yourself as like a person who's really thought out everything, where you can just like basically use like a streamer as like a Google and like just type into the chat, what's your take on this? And they'll have a take.
Mm.
Like which reminds me is kind of related, but like one thing I posted before the before this episode was like about a new Vosh video, and it was like
Oh no!
politics
Yeah, I saw that.
politics 102, and it's like a list, like the pinned comment is like a list of like timestamps, and it's like he talks about like everything, everything, like technocracy, capitalism, objectivism, anarcho-primitivism, postmodernism. Name it, he talks about it. It's like,
Oh my god!
Almost
and
kind of my pet issue, just because that's something I studied, and I feel like everybody talks about it kind of incorrectly.
yeah, it's, I mean, and one thing that kind of also, which is kind of, I think, also kind of related to like the transmedicalist sphere, which I also see in Riley and some other like big trans uh, content creators, which is that like they kind of position themselves as like giving the 101, right? Like you're unknowledgeable on trans issues. I'm here to give you the introduction, the 101, the trans issues for dummies. And I feel like that always kind of, and people do it with like leftism, more broadly too. And I feel like that positioning kind of like it kind of discourages people to engage critically with what you say, right?
Mhm.
Because like you're here to give them like the basics, and from there on out you can uh, start thinking about it further. But like, what if the basics you're giving are already wrong? Like, people aren't gonna engage critically with that if they go into it thinking like, oh, I'm here to learn the basics.
Yes, well, the
People are.
original
Oh, go
sort of
ahead.
defense of that 101 kind of attitude was that you're inoculating people against really regressive right-wing ideas. And if you're also doing that for left-wing ideas, take that to mean whatever you want, then I don't know that I agree with doing that. Seems like also it's counterproductive.
Because people may not like a lot of this stuff is really complicated, but one thing that I've noticed is that it's really easy to smell bullshit. You don't have to be very like intelligent, not intelligent. You don't have to be very like knowledgeable about a subject to be able to tell when someone is obviously feeding you bullshit, right? Versus when someone
Mhm.
is trying to engage in good faith. And I think that a lot of these like oh well I'll lie to you now because you're a baby at leftism, but there's
Yeah,
like a real thing somewhere that you've got to study. I think that's a really problematic position to take, and I think that takes people in a lot of really bad places because either
yeah,
they believe it fully, right? And then you get like idiots, or they're intelligent enough to go, you know what, this is bullshit. I'm gonna become a neoconservative. You know?
yeah. Milk. I think Milk had like something about this in his video, like where what ends up kind of happening is like people end up needing to unlearn some of the things they've learned when they've gone through like the whole introduction to leftism, which I mean, I don't think that's supposed to be the purpose of an introduction, right? Like that, like you're introducing uh, people to something, and essentially they have to take one step back again before they can take a step forward. Like, yeah, that's not really this
Well, that's
point
how
of
mainstream economics works.
yeah.
It's how
Well,
it's how
I mean,
neoclassical economics functions.
isn't it? I don't know about you guys, but every time that I found out that somebody was lying to me just to try to get me on their side in this online politics, I felt kind of betrayed. It did not make me sympathetic to their views.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's
says
weird.
it says something about like the need to lie about such things. It,
Hmm.
I mean, it's not even about like because communicating like the real content can be hard. So of course, like you might have to like simplify some things, but that's not it. A lot of times it's just you're basically like reading like almost like reading postcards at them. Wait, I don't know if that word is makes sense in English. It's probably not the.
No, I don't think I know what you mean there. But
It's
yeah, yeah, it's really annoying because like when you come across these people, right? And this is something I've talked about before. There's like certain figures on like the left um, that are placed on a pedestal, right? There,
mm-hmm.
you can't criticize them without being like a larper, and you 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 think you know better than these great leftists who have done so much for leftism, blah blah blah. And like for
Great and
example,
true revolutionaries
yeah,
of the world.
Yeah, for example, like Noam Chomsky and Richard Wolff. I think those are some of the big ones. Also,
Well, if they matter so much, the criticism is even more important.
Parenti too, with and like
and
I
and,
had
he,
so
and even
many
like
times.
Parenti gets like falsified. That's like what the funny parts is, that he wouldn't be a Dankist, but the Dankists absolutely love him, and basically has
Isn't it
to.
Yeah,
pronounced? Is it pronounced dung? Dungist?
I don't know. Just a,
yeah,
a, a
I had a
French
dungist
innovation.
correct me on that. I have a friend who's a dungist.
What
She's
I
a
tell
top
myself,
500 Overwatch player.
I think it's really funny how like a lot of these people who are like Stalinists on the internet, like Stalin would just kill them.
Yeah,
Like every time I this is like a fun, I guess, drinking game if you want to kill yourself, is to take a shot every time a Stalinist you're talking to says something that they would just immediately be killed for. Like I was in this argument with a bunch of like Marxist Leninists, not Stalinists, and they were like no, like the Soviet Union shouldn't have invaded Poland. They should
oh,
have
I
supported
remember.
like the Polish nationalists. And it's like, yeah, Stalin would have just killed you. Right? Like Stalin would have literally just murdered you, probably himself for saying that, you know? Or
yeah,
people will be
It's
like, you
funny.
know, like there was no law of value in the Soviet Union under Stalin. You know, I've heard people say that, and Stalin would be just like, that's wrong. You know?
yeah. It's
Yeah, well, of course they don't believe that he would have killed them, and that's why they're Stalinists.
Uh,
Oh, yeah, it also like explains like the cope around like the abortion laws, or the repression about like homosexuality. Like there's always going to be a way to just cope about these things. It was like the material conditions. If I say material conditions enough, that means like Daddy Stalin won't put me in the gulag, or will just not.
I hate that shit so much. Half
the
of
ma-
leftists online just use material conditions as a buzzword.
Yeah.
well, because
Like they say it
material
doesn't have a
conditions is
meaning.
everything. This is one of those stupid things. Everything is material conditions. All right. Like, oh, there's like some class
I
condition. There's
I
like,
would like some Stalinists to one day go like, well, the material conditions are important, but like we also need to consider material conditions. Like those are like we don't talk about those enough. Like I would like
The
someone to
immaterial
go like
conditions.
yeah,
that.
the preternatural conditions.
Like I mean, you might as well say the world, right? Like we need to
Yeah.
care about the world. It's ridiculous. But like one thing I wanted to say, like I think it's interesting how like these figures is basically blasphemy to go against them, but like not against them, but against like what people think they believe, right? Because they themselves are committing blasphemy too, but like they don't even realize it. So yeah, it just becomes kind of a game of like, no, you're the one
Which I get.
blaspheming the sacred like Michael Parenti. No, you're the one blasphemizing the sacred Michael Parenti.
You know what? Wait. Well, um, I guess like it's the funny thing about like the super like anti-revisionists, which like it's it's kind of like it's kind of funny in a way. Wait, what am I trying to say? Oh right, like
Anti-revisionism is itself based on a revisionist reading of Marx.
yeah, and like and like what's like what is the big deal about revisionism? Okay, we know like Bernstein, but like it seems like a lot of people is just like it's it's a lot of about like purity and thinking that they understood Marx correctly, and never asking themselves like, okay, maybe he was wrong about this or that, and they don't like entertain it, and it's just like, okay, no, we have to like we have to like we have to make sure that at least for ourselves, like everything is in order, like there's harmony in the world, and I understand like the through line of like, you know, Jesus, Saint Paul, and like it's basically a bit like that, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are so preoccupied with like trying to understand Marx that they don't try to like look broader than that and see like, okay, was Marx right about this? Was he right about this? Right? Like they're so preoccupied with understanding him, interpreting him correctly that they don't really care to question like whether he was actually correct about something.
And well, that's for Marx, but then like for Lenin or Stalin or Trotsky, then you also have to add the additional layer that these were like they did like, whoa, okay, no, Marx was like a political actor, but like it's not the same as like you are part of like a revolution and then the counter revolution. Like there's plenty to think into, but even then, like it's, yeah, you have to like just twist yourself into a pretzel to like justify like all the twists and turns, and then either like either you just like, I don't know how to do it. I honestly don't know. That must
It
be,
it
it takes a
it
talent.
kind of it kind of reminds me of like there's this like Reddit post Doe once read on stream, and it was like I'm not sure what subreddit it was. I think relationship advice or something, and it was about like a uh, a guy who was a Hegel scholar, right?
Oh no,
I'm not sure if any of you remember
I
this.
remember this one.
And he essentially said like um, everything uh, like after Hegel is either like redundant or like just wrong because like either they agree with Hegel or like they or they're wrong because they disagree with Hegel. And his wife uh, was like a physicist, right? And she honestly tried to engage with his work, and it was about like something to do with physics. And he had mentioned like I've never opened a physics book in my life, right? And she was just like, yeah, no, this is just like very basic. Just this is just wrong. Like since Hegel has wrote that, we've like come to understand that this is just not how it works, right? And instead of like updating his understanding of physics to like the 21st century, he just doubled down on it and was just like, oh, now it can't be wrong because like the whole framework necessitates it for it to be true. And there were like a whole bunch of Hegel people in that stream, and they were like, yeah, no, it's just wrong. He, I mean, he lived like centuries ago. It's okay to admit like Hegel wasn't like didn't have a 21st century understanding of physics, right? But like
The Kingdom of Precious Particle Accelerator.
yeah, it's very strange how people yeah kind of pick these thinkers and they just treat them as like I mean essentially as like gods
I
or
mean,
like
they don't even know to like just do like a basic like, you know, just how do I say this? You know, be able to read someone and just, you know, it's fine if you don't understand the whole context of, and you haven't like read like 3 biographies and like several volumes explaining like the context of like every text and like that's fine. You can just, you know, you can sometimes just like riff on something or just take something from it, even if like the whole like context, like, right? You get what I'm saying?
yeah I think I get what you're saying. Like I made this point once that like even if you misinterpret something like right
What
if
matters
you
more
misinterpret
is like what it made you think about, and
yeah if you misinterpret the text, but you get a good point out of it. That maybe the point is better than what the original meaning of the text was.
Mhm.
I mean, it's probably at some point still helpful to be aware that like you
Yeah.
derived it from like a misinterpretation, but like yeah, it's okay to like take points from a text in a way that wasn't meant to convey those points.
I think we've got like 2 episodes here.
Perhaps.
Essentially,
Yes.
this is a double. This is a
This is a
double header,
marathon. It's
special
a
one.
double penetration of whatever this podcast is called.
No.
Sorry, I don't think that's the term.
I mean,
This is the low hanging fruits podcast. Bang bang
Yeah.
talk. Thank you for
I
appearing
mean-
on it.
I mean,
I know some of us are high and tight. I'm just gonna say that. I think it's a little bit. I think that's not universally correct.
look, the
No,
low.
I think the low-hanging fruits are the things we're talking about sometimes.
Yeah.
It's yeah, but it's like it's also that we're the fruits. So it's it's a double entendre.
And we're
Yeah.
low hanging means.
I mean, yeah. That's. I mean. What did I think of this?
It's a
now?
dick joke.
I mean, yeah, but now I put like the words like Donald Parkinson and low hanging fruits together, and I had a very bad image come to mind, and yeah.
Top 10 things I'm not gonna think about. Thank you for putting that in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate.
Did we wanna like wait? I
Oh.
want to talk about like
Oh wait.
the new book coming out too.
Oh yeah. So on the
I mean,
previous,
I'm really excited for it.
Let's not get too far into it because I'm probably just gonna keep this as one thing because we
Yeah.
did a little transition and everything.
well, we had a
Yeah.
previous episode talking about the Peter Coffin book, and now apparently Caleb Maupin has done like a book on BreadTube and how it's like just a thing.
It's literally that meme where the guy in the park is like, "I was murdered."
Yeah, it's called RedTube Serves Imperialism, Examining the New Ground of Internet Pseudo-Socialism,
Yeah,
which is like,
that's gonna be
I
fun.
think he's gonna do some self-critique there, going by the title.
Yeah.
I think what he means is that they're occasionally rude about Russians or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, well,
I mean,
Based.
like,
especially the
Based.
people,
Like-
the people he's
So
beefing
true,
with.
bestie.
Huh?
I said so true, bestie. Based
Yeah.
being rude about Russians. Very cool.
Yeah, no, it's like I'm starting to think imperialism is like an empty category for a lot of purposes. I don't like using the term. It needs a lot of like specific,
It does.
definitions
it-
before I feel good talking about imperialism,
Definitely tends
Just-
to like get thrown around very easily, and then you can dig into it, and you're like, wait, that's just capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, I've not had access to the book yet, so I can't riff on it too much. But just going by the title,
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering like, RedTube is like if you look at like the whole of YouTube, right? Like politics YouTube is already kind of like a small like part of like
Mhm.
YouTube as a whole, right? Which includes like the big right wing channels, and like within that, within politics YouTube, RedTube is also a small part of it, right? So like, how does that, if BreadTube disappeared, how would that impact imperialism? That
Well,
would be
never
my
know.
question going into that book.
And
There's
also,
a
If I-
mentality. There's a mentality that like because a lot of people in the United States support like gay rights, and because the U.S. likes to talk about gay rights,
which is it's basically it is, if I remember correctly, like that's part of like their policy is it's kind of kind of like,
The idea is that like
Yeah, yeah.
like if you accuse Russia of being like repressive against gay people or LGBTQ people, the sexually confused community, if you accuse Russia of being like oppressive towards people, then it's like, well, you're supporting the State Department says that Russia is bad to gays, and it's like, well, the State Department says a lot of things. You know what I mean? It's like if you're like there's 144 million people in Japan, they're like, where'd you get that from the CIA World Fact Book? Like you're supporting the CIA. You know, there's a lot of these organizations say an incredibly massive amount of stuff. You know, I just the fact that like the U.S. State Department takes some position somewhere doesn't make it automatically like agreeing with it is like imperialism. You know what I mean? Like oh, if you look at the State Department priorities, it's like, oh, they want to have clean water in Africa, and you're like, well, yeah, that's probably a good thing. And you're like, well, no, you're supporting the state. You know what I mean? It's just, I mean, yeah, there's like privatization and water use issues. Like it's not like a, but
I mean, I've not like read the book yet, so maybe he cites like the CIA citing like
wait, big question.
Bosch and Philosophy Tube, and maybe he found something that like the CIA relies heavily on RedTube videos to support itself.
Elyssa,
Who knows?
Elyssa, you're begging the question. How do you know that there's going to be bibliography or citations? Coffin didn't get me used to that.
I gotta say, I'm really excited.
I have to rein you guys in here. This is going on too long.
Yeah, okay.
This has to be the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for listening. I really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed the episode, in the comments below, put your credit card number and your date of birth and the 3 numbers on the back.
Answer these fun questions. What's your social security number?
Your mother's maiden name. Comment below with your password.
Comment below if you're a hot shorty.
Post hole in the comments.
Comment below if you're a hot redhead. It's relevant to the interest
No!
of any host. I'm not going to say which, but it's relevant to some interests.
And if you have like short black curly hair that's like really soft, and you're kind of wayfish.
If you have a cat and I can pet it, comment below.
This is the difference
Okay.
between men and women's sexualities right there.
If Caleb Maupin sees this, like, could we get the book for free? Because I really don't want to pay for it.
I'll leave a positive.
We should do this. We should pose as a character and get him to send us a free copy of the book and be like, we're gonna be reviewing, and we set up a fake site that we're gonna be reviews, and like we pretend like, you know, like Dengists, or we can have like somebody else to like pretend to, I don't know.
We should do that, and we should say it in the recording so that everybody knows.
We can cut that out, or like this might not be released when we pull that out. Okay.
Just because you said that, I'm not going to cut it out.
Anyways.
But yeah, thank you everybody.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.